G'day guys, welcome back to a new episode of the Band of Riders podcast, episode 109. Of course, we have a lot to talk about today. Gather Round has completed, so I want to cover a couple of things that happened over the weekend. We'll be talking about the Willie Rioli situation and my thoughts about it, the preview to round 6, AFL Fantasy chat, and of course, much more. So let's not waste any more of your time. Let's roll the intro and get straight into it. Welcome to the Boundary Riders podcast, your one-stop shop for all your AFL content needs.
He looks at his options, and Jack Ginnivan says, boys, you brought me to the club to do just this!
But this guy has Flog written all over him.
From attack down, Reed sprints away from Petrarca, leaves him in his wake, takes a second bounce, takes a third. The sheer arrogance of Harley Reid. Finish the job, young man!
So let's get into the footy news from the week that was. So guys, as you can probably tell, my brother is not here today. Was here the last couple of weeks, but unfortunately has had to go back to work after his couple of weeks off. So it's just me today, but you know, he was kind of losing us all anyway, so he needed a little bit of a break. But nonetheless, Gather Round, I wanted to talk about quickly. A really good weekend. Now, I know my Swans lost, but what a way to end it between Port Adelaide and Hawthorn. And overall, the weekend was really good. The weather was a little bit too hot, I will say, and I've got something to talk about that later in the episode regarding the flog of the week. But overall, I think it was a very good weekend. I think next year will be the last year South Australia has the contract for Gather Round, and I am quite biased on this, but I think Adelaide should keep on holding Gather Round. I think that it's the perfect place to have it. Places like Perth, it's too far away. I think that Tasmania is too small and don't have a big enough ground to accommodate for the big teams. When you think about it, Adelaide Oval holds 50,000, and the majority of the games were, all games at Adelaide Oval were over 40,000. Like, it was Melbourne's biggest crowd they've had so far this year, and it was in a different state. And it wasn't even like against the Crows or whatever either. It was against Essendon. And Essendon obviously have a big fan base, but that is pretty embarrassing for the Demons to have their biggest crowd of the year against Essendon in Adelaide. So they don't get that crowd anywhere other than Victoria. And even then, I don't even think they would have got it at the MCG anyway. But looking at it, I think Queensland, I don't think they could have it, to be honest. Considering they've already got opening round as well, I just don't think it's really that feasible. And sort of the same with New South Wales. I don't think they could either. And people are saying Victoria should host it. You're a fucking moron. You get half a Gather Round every single week. So I think South Australia is the perfect spot to have it. But yeah, I think the South Australia just keep on growing it every single year. Like, I don't know if many people would have heard this, but last week, Peter Malinauskas, the Premier of South Australia, actually mentioned that I think it was a 30% increase of state travel to South Australia grew by 30%. So obviously a lot of people this year were coming from interstate to come and enjoy Gather Round. And I think I noticed quite a lot of people from other states coming to the game from, other states, Victoria, whatever it was, because the parking wasn't too bad, I don't think. I didn't go to the Barossa, unfortunately, because we didn't get tickets for those games. But at Norwood, we were pretty fine, me and my brother, and Adelaide Oval, we were pretty cruisy on parking as well. So I think a lot of people obviously were travelling from hotels and stuff. And when we were going through the city at one point between games on Saturday, went to the CBD, and a lot of people were going back to the hotels in Adelaide. So I think that's how it's going to go going forward. So if you are from South Australia, or anyone really, I think the tickets will come out probably in December this year. So if you do want to come in 2026, I would say get in quick, because last year when the tickets went on sale, they sold within the first day. So I think that if you want to go, especially to the games outside of Adelaide Oval, you'd want to get in pretty quick. But yeah, overall, it was a great experience. Sydney did lose, like I said, but I think every single game had its certain allure to it, I would say. Even the Carlton West Coast game, I think that had some sort of allure to it. Now, granted, I think a lot of it was to do with Daniel Gorringe, but I think that did have a little bit of allure to it. And if I was AFL, to be honest, I think at this point, with West Coast being this poor, and they should be getting a seasonal bye every single time Gather Round comes around, because every single time they've come here for Gather Round, they have got smashed. Whatever team it is, at least for the love of God, put them in the Barossa. We don't need them at Adelaide Oval holding up a game. That Bulldogs Brisbane game should have been at Adelaide Oval one time or another. Now, to Alistair Clarkson, who was having a go about the weather and how the AFL scheduled it poorly or whatever, I don't know how he could have made that point and I don't feel like it was an excuse for the game itself, but to make that sort of point after your team got beaten, to say, oh, the AFL should have done a lot better with its scheduling. It's like, bro, they do the scheduling in, November or something? Are you kidding? What are the AFL? I mean, I definitely don't like to protect the AFL for... I think if you guys watch this, you know that. But I mean, you can't make it their fault for everything. I mean, they could not have expected that the weather in South Australia over the weekend was going to be 32 degrees. And granted, it was fucking hot. But the AFL was not their fault. So I just think that was ridiculous. But overall, Gather Round continues to improve year on year. And if you want to go in 2026, as soon as you see information regarding ticket sales, you need to get in on that day, on the hour, I would say. Wait in line for Gather Round tickets, an hour in advance, because the tickets sold out really quick for this season's one. And yeah, I think it's just going to keep on getting bigger and bigger. And games like Norwood and the Barossa, they only hold 10,000 supporters and they get sold out really quick. So just make sure to keep that in mind. But overall, if you haven't experienced Gather Round yet, it's so different to what any other round in the AFL would be. It's just such a experience. Everyone's got their different scarves on. Everyone's really enjoying it. Everyone's having fun. I don't think there's really that much bad stuff, really. I don't think there was anything bad to come out of the weekend in terms of supporter bases and stuff. So overall, I think it was great. And I think South Australia should continue to host it, because at the moment I think it's the perfect state to have it. It's a football state. They have a big enough ground. It's not too far away. No, it's not too far away to travel. And it's just, it's a real party atmosphere here, I guess, would probably be the way to put it. But let's move into a couple of topics over the weekend. So first of all, let's talk about some news regarding injuries and stuff. Unfortunately, Nick Bryan went out early against Melbourne on Saturday night. It's confirmed that he has done an ACL, so he'll be out for the rest of the year. So really unfortunate for him. Seemed to have maybe locked down that ruck spot for Essendon, especially with Draper playing up forward. So unfortunately going to miss the rest of probably the next 12 months or so. So that's really unfortunate. Nat Fyfe has suffered a moderate hamstring strain. Unknown of when he will return, but he will be assessed in the next couple of weeks. I don't really know where Nat Fyfe fits into Fremantle's lineup at the moment. He was playing in the Waffle over the weekend after injury over the preseason. He's been trying to work back through there, and I just don't see a way that Nat Fyfe returns to this Fremantle lineup. They're starting to get into their work. Now, granted, they haven't played too many hard teams, and he is a good depth player, but he's already, he can't even get on the field at the moment. He's not in their best 22, 23. He probably makes the emergency list, so maybe he can be a depth player, but I really see there's not many more games in Nat Fyfe's career, which is unfortunate because he's been a great player for so many years. But, I mean, at the end of the day, sometime it has to wind down. So maybe we'll see a few more games from Nat Fyfe. We'll have to wait and see. But right now, it's looking a little bit unlikely. On Melbourne, bad news keeps on getting worse. Kasai Pickett and Stephen May both in doubt for the game against Fremantle this weekend, both coming off some issues regarding the game in Gather Round against the Bombers. So, again, wait and see. I think Melbourne, I don't see them having much hope in that game either. But with those two out, I give them no hope. But we'll just have to wait and see on that front. Joel Amati has been ruled out for at least 1 week for Sydney with his hamstring issue. So that does open the door for Logan McDonald, who's played one game in the VFL 2 weeks ago. Last week they had the bye due to Gather Round. So we'll have to wait and see. I think Sydney will probably go for it. There's talk. I don't want to see Tom McCartan up forward again. I don't want to see it. I'm an avid hater of that decision. I don't think that he's been... it's not really been his fault, I will say, because the first 2 weeks when they tried it, they couldn't get it in there to him. And last week in the second half, Sydney weren't the greatest, but he doesn't look confident when he's up there. I think in the second half of the game against Collingwood, it proved to me that Tom McCartan can't go forward. He doesn't look confident. He dropped simple marks, and it just doesn't seem like the move to me. His best football has been in defence. He started his career as a forward. He didn't make it work. So they chucked him back. That's where he's been the best. So I think that Sydney should just keep on going with that. If you don't want to bring in Logan McDonald this week, I think you just persist with Peter Adams. And I know that's a amazing call from me. I don't think I would have been saying that 12 months ago. But if you don't feel comfortable with Logan McDonald at this stage to rush him back, I don't think they should, personally. If there is any sort of inkling of an injury or mistrust with Logan McDonald's body for this week, I would say leave him out. and just persist with Hayden McLean and and Peter Adams, and then bring in a small. That's what I would do if you're not 100%, 110% convinced Logan McDonald can run out the game. But anyway, that's what my thoughts on Sydney. And some good news on the injury front. Western Bulldogs seem to be looking like that Marcus Bontempelli is on track to play on Easter Sunday against St Kilda, while James Harms has been cleared of a serious foot injury. Of course, he did miss the 3 quarters against the Brisbane Lions over the weekend. So that's good news on the Doggies. If they can bring some players back after banking a couple of wins this season, maybe they can make a run. And Jordan De Goey seems to be set to return to Thursday night's game against the Brisbane Lions. He did miss the game against Sydney last week. However, at this stage, it does seem that Lockie Schultz will probably be out for another week or two. Now, on some tribunal suspension news at this stage, Patrick Voss is going to challenge his 3-game ban for his swinging arm and a tackle on Nick Vlaston on Sunday. Maybe he'll get a week off of his suspension, but I don't think he gets away with it. I don't think that's going to happen. James Peatling accepted his 1-match ban for his slam tackle on Thursday night. So a couple of AFL Fantasy watchers out there may want to just get rid of him at this stage. And Bailey Smith, I want to talk about this, fined $1,000 for flipping the bird at the umpire. At a Crows fan. How fucking ridiculous this was. Bailey Smith flips off the bird because a Crows fan says something abhorrent to Patrick Dangerfield, and Bailey Smith had a laugh and just gave him the finger to fuck him off. Ridiculous. Now, I don't know if it was the fan who had to go. I'm sure it wasn't. And I'm telling you right now, if I made that if I did that and I got caught and a player turned around and gave me the finger, I would not be coming out and having a go. And I don't think that's what the supporter did. But the fact that the AFL gave Bailey Smith a call, asked for a please explain, and then gave him a fine for that is ridiculous. I hate people saying, they need to set an example. How about you set an example, and if you're going to fine a player, you would know where that person is sitting at the end of the day. There's enough technology now, people would know who that is, that they would be able to find out and find the person who was doing that. And I'm not saying they should. I don't think they should be fining spectators for doing that either. But if you're gonna do something to a player, you should be doing it to someone else. And players, yes, they have the responsibility. Kids are watching and blah blah blah. But if you're a parent out there and you had a go at that, turn around to your kid and say, hey, don't do that. But also, don't yell at other people over the fucking fence. If you're a parent and you had an issue with Bailey Smith flipping the bird to someone. And also, know this, your kid's probably going to do it at one point. So get over it. Who cares? Bailey Smith had every right to do so. And he wasn't sorry about it. As he said in an interview with Channel 9, I think it was on the Friday morning, they asked him, some reporter was like, are you sorry for what you did? And he said no. As he fucking shouldn't. He shouldn't have to apologize for something that was the person at fault was the person screaming absurd language, from what I can tell, from what I know, and absurd words and whatever it was to Paddy Dangerfield. He has every right to tell the other guy to fuck off. So anyway, I think that's ridiculous that he got fined for that. But anyway, let's move into the Willie Rioli situation. So, of course, I'm sure everyone knows by now what happened in that game, Port Adelaide v Hawthorn. Port Adelaide blitzed them at the start. Hawthorn caught their way back, and Port Adelaide put them to bed in the end. And the one thing that sparked the huge melees at the end of the game, or towards the end of the game, was Willie Rioli was in the goal square, got a handball, and held the ball out to sell the candy to Jaff from Hawthorn. And Jaff didn't really appreciate that, pushed him over, and there was a big fight and whatever. Now, overall, I don't think that's a big deal. We'll talk about Hawthorn in a minute about them and how they're going. But on Port Adelaide, on Willie Rioli, he came out with an Instagram post after the game. I think it was on the night at some point. He said, in the post, play with fire, you're going to get burned. My hatred for this club, being Hawthorn, goes way past last year's antics. What they did to my dad and my brother is why I can't stand them, not the players. So that came out. That has to do with the issues regarding Cyril Rioli, I believe, as well, with obviously the racism scandal that was brought up. Now, I don't know a lot about that scandal, so I'm not going to sit here and act like I do, but it clearly does have an issue with Willie Rioli and the Hawthorn Football Club. That should be sorted behind closed doors. However, today, Willie Rioli has taken leave from Port Adelaide's, from the playing group from Port Adelaide in training at the moment, following a social media attack on on his point of view from, I'm assuming, Hawthorn fans, but who knows these days. And Sam Mitchell has said that he wants to talk to Willie Rioli. Now, I don't think I have to say this because I think it's most people's thoughts, except for fuckwits online. But obviously, you don't go and abuse a player no matter what the fuck happened. Get over it. It's not... I don't get why anyone does that. Like, my brother and I joke every now and then when he loses a multi or whatever, and I say, oh, you're going to go message the player and tell him how much of a fuckwit he was for losing his bet. But people actually do that, and it's ridiculous. Like, so I don't think fucking Marcus Bontempelli gives a fuck that you missed out on your one multi because he only got 29 disposals and not 30. I'm sorry. I don't think that's a big deal. Complain about it with your mates. Don't message the footballer. Who gives a fuck? And it's your... I mean, if you're going to bet, like, that's on to you. Like, I don't have an issue with betting, but if you're fucking going to do it, you have to deal with the consequences when you get it wrong, okay? So don't go and blame, oh, some AFL footballer got subbed out 3/4 time when I wanted him for an extra 5 touches. I'm going to message him a death threat. You're a fucking moron. And the same goes to the people who abused Willie Rioli for this statement. Now, he shouldn't have really done it. Not to say that he should be kept silent, but to say he shouldn't have done it because it wasn't... I don't think it's the right way to go about it. It was a bit out of emotional. It was an emotional response after the game. I probably should have just kept it. Should have had a response a little bit better than that. Like on an Instagram post at night, probably not the greatest look, I would say. But he has some sort of issue. It needs to be sorted out one way or another. As a supporter of anyone, if you're going to go out there and say to a player when you have no idea what's going on and say, oh, you fucking idiot, and call him some sort of racial slur, you're a fucking moron and your brain needs to be checked, I feel like. And I know some people may say I'm a bit mean here, but I think you're a bit of a fuckwit if you're going to send a message to a player of any, really at all. I don't think you should be sending messages to these people anyway. I mean, unless a player wants to send me a message and wants to collab at one point, with my 190 subscribers, obviously not. But just leave them alone. They're players. They're people at the end of the day. And I don't think you wouldn't be messaging anyone else if they weren't an AFL footballer. So I would just say leave it be. And yeah, Willie Rioli, hopefully he returns soon. The racial slurs obviously are uncalled for. And even just sending him a message is really ridiculous. You shouldn't be sending it at all. Just let it be. Like, you sending a message to him is not going to fix the situation for your club or for your stance on racism or whatever the hell it is. I just think it's ridiculous all round. So I think it should just be sorted out behind closed doors at this point, and we'll just see what happens. But yeah, Willie Rioli at the moment has decided to step away from the Port Adelaide Footy Club for the time being. There's no return date at this stage, so we'll just have to wait and see. But before we go any further, a message from me. If you guys enjoy the content and you want to see more, then make sure to become a member on the channel today. For just $4 a month, you can get early access to video essays, access to live recording to the Boundary Riders podcast, along with exclusive stream perks and much more. And something that I'm super excited to introduce to channel membership this year is the members vote. Every week with the review, you can cast your vote to have your say on the Boundary Riders medal. So for all that and more, click the link down below, and for the added bonus of getting an extra inch onto your member, then do it now. But anyway, let's get back into the content. But I want to talk about Hawthorn a little bit from that game. Are the Hollywood Hawks dead, essentially? Because they have been the fairy tale story for the last 18 months, or the last 12 months, I would say. From being 0-5 to running amok in the league, basically taking every single team to the sword, running their way into finals, winning a final, and then losing the semi-final. There was a little bit of a crack that did emerge. The fact that this team could deal it out with their celebrations, but couldn't take it when Port Adelaide basically put them in their place. We saw how James Sicily reacted after that game when Ken Hinkley did the aeroplane sort of antics and all that sort of stuff and said a couple of things to Jack Ginnivan and all that sort of stuff that boiled over. I don't think Ken Hinkley really should have done it, but at the end of the day, they have been thrown through all kinds of loops, Port Adelaide, for a while now. Ken Hinkley has as well. And for Hawthorn to be dealing it out willy-nilly, you got to be able to take it as well. I think that's the general consensus that most people have. And that was really the first crack that emerged in Hawthorn's, sort of, I don't want to say aura, because that's kind of a Gen Z word, but the mystique of the club of the last 12 months. They're the young, exciting Hawks, the Hollywood Hawks, And we didn't really see it much at the start of the year. Like, they won their first 4 games. They won them pretty convincingly. And we were all like, yep, this team's going to be up there this year. But then they came up after the bye against Port Adelaide, and they were utterly shell-shocked in that first quarter and a half. It wasn't even a first half. The quarter and a half, Port Adelaide jumped them at the gun, and Hawthorn weren't ready for it. And when James Sicily had a shocker in that first quarter and a half as well. He couldn't touch the footy, and when he did, he turned it over. He looked like he didn't know what was going on. And Port Adelaide, they've always responded in emotion, especially with Ken Hinkley. So I wasn't too surprised. I was surprised about how much Port Adelaide dominated and how much Hawthorn were off. But overall, I wasn't too surprised that Port Adelaide were in front at that point of the game. The amount of margin it was, I was surprised. Anyway, as I got into the second half, there wasn't really too many spot fires. There were a couple, but overall it wasn't too bad. There were a couple of things that I saw from the Hawthorn players at some points in that second half that I didn't really like at all. And it's a little bit reminiscent of the unsociable Hawks, which was in the mid-2010s, which overall I'm sure Hawthorn fans wouldn't care too much about because, they were so successful. But this team hasn't achieved anything just yet, so I would be a little bit careful about it. There was one point when there was a stoppage outside the forward 50 of Port Adelaide. I think it was in the third quarter, or it may have even been the last quarter. John Newcombe ran through with an elbow out and almost took someone's jaw out. I don't like that at all. That is fake tough, and that's ridiculous. And if he did connect with someone, that would have given him 3 weeks, and he would have been abused across the league because that was ridiculous. He ran through a stoppage like that, and there are other situations that happened like that as well throughout the second half. And the Hollywood Hawks and all the beauty around them did take it off them, I think, in this game. And I think it's going to start to turn the narrative about Hawthorn in the coming weeks when they lose games. Because it's going to happen. Inevitably, teams lose throughout the season, even if they are going to be a premiership favourite. And they didn't handle it very well, a loss. They were pushing players, giving away stupid free kicks like that. Willie Rioli celebration, overall, I don't think it's that bad compared to some of the things that Ginnivan was doing. And I don't think Ginnivan should stop what he was doing, by the way. I think the personality in the game, I think, is great. And I'm really happy that Hawthorn have brought it back somewhat. But you got to deal with other teams beating you and, showing off in their own way. And for Jaff to push him over, he gave away 2 goals, which did inevitably lose that game for them. Didn't show much maturity at all. And I would be a little bit concerned if I was Sam Mitchell. I think he's a really good coach, arguably one of the best in the game at the moment. But I would be a little bit concerned about their very much their start of the game because they seemed a little bit. They kind of seemed like they were sitting on their heels, waiting for Port Adelaide to act emotional, on the point of giving away a free kick and doing something stupid. But Port Adelaide didn't do that. They let their football do the talking, and Hawthorn sat there waiting for them to give away stupid free kicks and act like their way, and then get them that way. But Hawthorn were shell-shocked after they realised that Port Adelaide were just playing tough footy rather than acting, emotionally by hitting someone behind the play, which I actually thought Port Adelaide would do. So I've got to give credit to Port. They made their football do the talking rather than do something stupid and, get into a huge melee in the opening minutes and let that, tire them out. And eventually Hawthorn would go and, jump them. Port Adelaide did their football do the talking. You have to respect that. But Hawthorn didn't. They were too busy. It seemed like they were too in the emotion of, we're going to just roll them today because, we lost in that final, but a lot of things didn't go our way. And, we just really don't like Ken and all that sort of stuff. But they kind of look sooky. I think they didn't look like the Hawthorn, the happy Hawks that we've seen over the last couple of months, over the last 6 or 12 months. They looked like they were sad. They looked like things weren't going their way and they weren't happy with it. Now, granted, the free kick count, holy shit. Port Adelaide were fucking robbed of a couple and Hawthorn were gifted a couple of opportunities. But at the end of the day, I'd be a little bit concerned if I was Sam Mitchell. Not too concerned. I think they're going to be right up there when the whips are cracking. But there is some things they do to sort out. I think this may be the best thing that happened to Hawthorn, a loss over the weekend against a team like Port, because they were expected to win this game and win it by quite a lot. And the fact that they weren't really prepared for it shows to me that they do need to fix some issues. There were some issues with Hawthorn coming into the game. I think I read a statistic saying that they're the 4th worst attack in the comp at the moment, and their pressure game up in the forward half has been pretty poor, but their defence has been carrying. So that is something they will have to fix up. And a game plan revolving around small forwards has to be heavily influenced by forward pressure. You're looking at Ginnivan and that. He hasn't had a good start to the year, Jack Ginnivan. Nick Watson's had an okay performance, I think, once so far this year. But it seemed a lot more that the players like Will Day have been carrying them, and he's going to be out for, 3 months nearly. So they need to find other avenues to goal, other avenues to, plan Bs and that sort of stuff that they need to use to get their team going forward for the rest of the year, because they can't just rest on their morals and have 4 wins in a row. And then, I think this team now should be making top 4 at this point, because they have had a really good start to the year. They've got a very good defense now, which is something that probably was questioned in the past. And they need to continue on and make this point that they're going to be top 4 team. But overall, I think the mystique of the Hollywood Hawks is starting to wear off. I think most people are starting to see now, okay, it's a bit of an act, but right now, the act of being like the happy team, the team that's going to show personality, kind of wears off when you're starting to throw elbows around and act a bit like the sooky 5-year-olds that, if something's not going my way, throw all the toys out the cot, essentially. So I hope that they don't go that way. I hope that they continue to show their personality on the field, but just don't, when you're starting to lose games, don't just throw all the toys out the cot and just have a cry about it. Which I kind of saw a little bit in that semi-final last year when Sam Mitchell, after the game in that press conference, sounded it was a very emotional response. He shouldn't have. It's a little bit unfair that he did have to make that interview straight after the game. But the fact that someone asked him if he's going to talk to Ken Inkley and he responded, "Absolutely not," made him look like a bit of a sook, in my opinion. I don't know. Maybe a bunch of Hawthorn supporters will see this and abuse me for it and send racial slurs my way. Who knows? Maybe that's all of them. I doubt it. But let's move on. All right. So for now, guys, let's move into our preview to round 6. Of course, we have the Good Friday game, which is the Women's and Children's Appeal. I'm sorry, I can't remember which charity it is. And one more thing as well for next week. They just revealed today St Kilda their new Guernsey for Anzac round. Looked fucking phenomenal. If premierships were won by Guernsey design, St Kilda would be leading the premiership race at the moment. But they're not, and I don't think they're in a premiership anytime soon. But anyway, the Guernsey looked amazing. So I hope Sydney do make a Anzac Day Guernsey this year, because they're basically changing it into a round now, which I think is a great idea. So we'll just have to wait and see how that works out. We'll have a long weekend. Hopefully they do, but I think the Swans probably stick with their gather round jumper that they did, because that's like a whole range or whatever wank they try to spin it as. But anyway, enough talking about that crap. Let's move into the preview to round 6. Of course, gather round has just completed, and what a round it was. But now we move to more regular scheduled programming, I would say. Games back at the normal venues. And we do start with one of the big games of the year, round 6. Easter Thursday clash, the traditional game between the Lions and Collingwood. What a matchup this is. Both teams in really good form in the win-loss record at the moment. The Lions undefeated. Collingwood still have that one loss against the Giants. A massive contest. And me and my brother are both tipped differently in this one. Now, he has gone the Brisbane Lions. He has said with the home ground advantage, they may get off to a slow start, but coming home with a house on fire. No margin is big enough at the moment to worry them. Forward line is dominating and the midfield is doing just the same. Now, I'm actually going to be going Collingwood here, but I want to just cover my brother's points on Brisbane so far. They are my premiership favourites at the moment. It's only a couple of rounds in, you would say. It's not even a quarter of the season through yet, but the Lions, they, like he says, no margin is too much for them. Come back against the Bulldogs last week from absolutely nowhere in a venue where they haven't played too often and really put the Bulldogs to the sword in that second half. And they've done that a few times already this season. So if they can continue that sort of stuff, then I think they're going to be really hard to beat. However, a couple of the reasons why I think Collingwood are going to win this game is one, I feel like Brisbane have to lose a game. Now, I think Collingwood are a team that can stand with them in the midfield. I don't think Brisbane are necessarily going to tag Nick Dacos. And we saw last week how good he was against Jordan, being able to shake off that tag pretty easily and was their best player on the ground. It was arguably one of his best games of his career, in my opinion, Nick Dacos. I think their forward line can stand up here. There has to be a point where Brisbane's forward line doesn't have a good game. Eric Hipwood really had to lift in that second half to get his team over the line, and I really don't see the consistency of Eric Hipwood continuing, so that's why I'm going Collingwood. I think they can match it in the midfield. Their defence, I think, is a little bit shaky for Collingwood, but I think they can hold up, and their forward line has been pretty underrated so far this year, so that's hence why I'm going with the Pies. After that, a massive contest between Adelaide and the Giants at Adelaide Oval. Big contest for both sides. Crows have dropped off the last couple of weeks. The Giants regaining their form after their loss to Hawthorn a couple of weeks ago. Now, my brother, he has tipped the Crows. He has said their response should come from their midfield. And with their tall forward line, he thinks that at least one of them should be able to get on top of the Giants in defence. And this is where I kind of differ from it. I actually think the Giants line up very well against Adelaide. This is at Adelaide Oval. If this was at Sydney, I'd be tipping the Giants 100%. It was a bit 50-50 at first, but the one issue that I have with the Crows at the moment is their defence. And with players like Jesse Hogan up there with great form at the moment, Toby Green is in great form at the moment, is in that All-Australian form that he had a couple of years ago. And I think that the Crows' defence simply can't hold up here. It's been exposed the last couple of weeks, the Crows' attack. If they can't find enough avenues to goal, then they struggle to score. They did have a good first half against the Cats, but again, once they couldn't find those avenues to goal, even against the Cats' defence that was lost a couple of players through injury, the Crows still weren't able to penetrate, and this is where I think the Giants are going to stand up. They line up very nicely. Sam Taylor, Connor Iden, Jack Buckley, and they may even have to bring in another taller defender if they need to. You've got Lee Lear in the reserves who's playing quite well at the moment. So I think the Giants stand up really nicely here. And they don't really have a bad record at Adelaide Oval. So hence why I'm going with the Giants in this one. Sunday evening, Bulldogs v St Kilda, a very interesting contest this one. Both teams have probably done a little bit more than what most pundits were expecting at the start of the year. The Bulldogs are only 2-3, but they have been in basically every game so far this year. Did drop off in that second half against the Brisbane Lions, which I don't think Luke Beveridge would have really liked. I think that they should have held on to that game. You shouldn't be up by that much at some point in games and then go on to lose it. And St Kilda really got a wake-up call last week against the Giants. A little bit of overhype on them, I would say, and maybe they believed it a little bit, I don't know, but the flattering scoreline at the end from the Giants doesn't show the story. The Giants dominated that game, basically, from the second quarter onwards, and the St Kilda do have some question marks. Now, my brother has gone the Western Bulldogs in this game. He says that they're more experienced in the midfield. Could see the return of Marcus Bontempelli, and he can't see the St Kilda kicking a score. However, I'm looking on the side of the Saints that they had a really down week. I think that there's going to be a little bit of talking points on them saying that they're not good enough. I think they were brought down to earth a little bit. Jack McRae was locked down, and I think he's a very important player to them. So Bulldogs, interested to see if they will go to him. I think the running game of the Saints will catch the Bulldogs off guard, and it is under the roof as well where St Kilda thrive. So that's why I'm going St Kilda. But I think this is actually going to be a really underrated game going into round 6. And the final game of the round, of course, Easter Monday, traditional clash, Geelong v Hawthorn. Both teams are at the peak of their powers. This is like the mid-2010s to early 2010s, even the late 2000s. Contest sets up for one of the biggest in at least the last 5 years or so. Both teams in really good form. Hawthorn had a shock loss last week to Port Adelaide. Geelong coming out of the clouds against Adelaide to steal that one in the end and really just run over the top of them. True 50-50 game. Same as what my brother has said. He said could go either way, but he does see that the Hawks don't really have a matchup for Dangerfield, and he has turned back the clock playing up forward. So he is going with Geelong. I'm going to be going with Hawthorn here. I think that Sam Mitchell won't allow that first half performance to slide away. I think that the Hawks were very under pressure early against Port Adelaide, and they simply couldn't handle that sort of pressure. I think Sam Mitchell, as a professional coach as he is, won't let that sort of game slide. The fact that they brought that game back from absolutely nowhere, and midway through that last quarter, we were at that game, me and my brother, and we thought that Hawthorn could have stole it. So I think that Hawthorn really did keep on fighting. I really don't see another performance like that from them again. So I think that Hawthorn will respond from that poor performance in Gather Round, and I think they will respond. They get an 8-day break to review that performance. So I think Hawthorn are going to be one of the teams up there this year. They had to kind of have a down game. They've been up since basically early parts of last year. So they had to have a down game once in a while, and that was kind of, I think, their game where you sort of give them a bit of a mulligan, in my opinion. So that's why I'm going with the Hawks. But let's get into our full tips for round 6. My tips are Collingwood to beat Brisbane, North Melbourne to beat Carlton, Essendon to beat West Coast, Fremantle to beat Melbourne, Giants to beat the Crows, Suns to beat the Tigers, Swans to beat Port Adelaide, St Kilda to beat the Bulldogs, and Hawthorn to beat the Cats. And my brother's tips for round 6 are the Lions to beat Collingwood, North Melbourne to beat Carlton, Essendon to beat the West Coast Eagles, Fremantle to beat Melbourne, Adelaide to beat the Giants, Gold Coast to beat Richmond, Sydney to beat Port Adelaide, Bulldogs to beat St Kilda, and the Cats to beat Hawthorn. But let's get to our certainty picks. My brother had the first choice this week. He has gone with the Bulldogs to beat St Kilda. Of course, the Bulldogs losing to Brisbane last week. And I have gone Hawthorn to beat the Cats. Of course, Hawthorn losing to Port Adelaide last week. So those are our certainty picks. But let's get to the tipping ladder, of course, for the channel. Ethan Sports is still on top. Had a very good week with the 7 tips. So it does seem that most people got most of the tips this week, especially the favourites went out and won. Shout out to Leviticus for getting 8 tips. He was the only person who picked Port Adelaide and almost picked the whole card. He picked Sydney over Collingwood, so really unfortunate there, but he's in a pretty good spot right now. Hasn't used his joker, I believe, sitting on 33 tips, only 5 from top spot, who a lot of people up the top have used their certainty. Lucas M, unfortunately, has dropped right off the pace, only getting 4, going for a couple of roughies and gather round. Has dropped right off the pace, and I believe he's used his joker, so it's going to be really hard to see him coming back. At the moment, I sit in 11th spot. I sit with 32 tips at the moment, 6 tips off the top. I got 7 tips, so I'm pretty happy with that over the weekend. And my brother has dropped right off. He has skidded down all the way to 17th spot, so that's on the lower half of the tipping ladder. He got 5 over the weekend, went for a couple of roughies. Sydney was one of them, and got a couple of wrong ones. And both of us made the unfortunate decision to late change our tip from Geelong. Tom Stewart was a late out of that game. We went to the Crows. Halfway through that game, we were like, oh, great decision from both of us. And then all of a sudden, Crows turned their feet up. Cats came from the clouds and won the game, and we lost that tip. So unfortunate from both of us to miss that crucial tip in the end. Could have got us right up there in the end, but overall, not too bad from either of us. I'm pretty happy with where I am, and still holding my joker. I'm in a pretty good spot, in my opinion. Now, don't worry, guys. My brother is still giving us his bets for this week, so bro's bets will be up in a second. I should have asked him, actually, if he had a bet for us, but like a exclusive one that he's been giving over the last couple of weeks. But anyway, he did say it was an Easter special, so get excited, guys. If you're obviously betting, make sure to gamble responsibly. But for now, let's get into my brother's bets for round 6. All right, guys, who's ready for the Easter long weekend? First, we'll start with our same game multi for Thursday night footy. First leg is Lockie Neal for 25 plus disposals. Second leg is Josh Dunkley for 25 plus disposals. Third leg is Jasper Fletcher for 15 plus disposals. And lastly, the fourth leg, Paddy Lipinski for 15 plus disposals, valued at $3.10. Now we get to my certainty bet this week. I'm taking Luke Parker for 20 plus disposals against the Blues, valued at $1.48. Finally, we get to my outside the boundary bet. This week, I'm taking Sam Durham for 30 plus disposals against the Eagles, valued at $4.30. And as always, guys, gamble responsibly. And now, before we get to the flog of the week, we have our AFL Fantasy review, of course. Now, my brother, I usually try to ask him a couple of questions regarding the AFL Fantasy team over the weekend. With his team, just before we get into the clip, but obviously he's not here today, so this is basically the clip that we posted over the weekend. And I'm also wondering, guys, if we should change the name of the channel. We will still upload the podcast on here every single week, but I'm thinking it's maybe a way of not growing it as much. I think some people may be turned off by calling a channel the podcast, the Boundary Riders podcast, because I think I want to make it more than that. I want to make it some clips of the podcast, trying to cut that up. But then also have the AFL Fantasy review, and in the off season, I want to kind of use it as I want to maybe just do something on stream every week or something like that. So maybe I could add some sort of clips on there too. So I may change it to something else, but no matter what, the Boundary Riders podcast will be coming out on this channel every single week, no matter what. But anyway, enough of that talk. Let's get into the AFL Fantasy review for round 5. AFL Fantasy review over the weekend. I've just got to say thank you very much to Zach Merritt. What a performance from him against Melbourne in Gather Round. Brought him in this week for a captaincy performance, basically. I didn't really have a feeling on much of my players who's I'm going to pick from captain. So I brought in Zach Merritt as a huge upgrade from my trade from last week to hopefully get someone who can score a good score. And my word, did Zach Merritt deliver. 134, of course, double that, 268. And my round 5 score, of course, as you can see on the screen, 2,122. Not a really good rank. I thought I would have done a little bit better than that on rank, but 1,963 over the week, so I'm pretty happy with that. My rank has gone all the way up to 2,116 after a couple of weeks in the low 10,000s. I've been able to jump into the nearly into the top 2,000 in AFL fantasy ranking at the moment. Now, looking at a couple of good players, Max Holmes has been a bit up and down this season, but 133 from him against the Crows was brilliant. The Bison Trainer show as the rookies, 94 and 90. You love to see it. Of course, Zach Merritt, great job from him. Connor Rosie with the 126. Looks like he's playing a little bit more of a half-back role, maybe. So good job from him. The Ashcroft brothers, 101 to Will. Levi with the 94, brilliant. Max Gorn with the 118, really good performance. And Jason Orne-Francis as well with the 100. So really good performances from all of them. Zach Reed I didn't have in the team, but 90, I love that. And also El Harley with the 73. Started as the sub, came on early, but he had really good performance as well. Now, there were a couple of lower lights that I do want to take a look at. Sam De Koning, only 56. Unfortunately, with Reece Stanley coming to the team, he's not getting much of that ruck roll anymore, so 56, pretty disappointing. Xavier Lindsay and Murphy Reid, I was really hoping that those guys could score, but unfortunately not too good. Tom De Koning, I don't know what happened to him. Against the West Coast Eagles, you thought he'd absolutely thrive. Didn't really look interested in the game when I was there, to be honest, so Tom De Koning only got 75 points. Jack McRae, you give him a little bit of a reprieve considering he was tagged by Toby Bedford, but 59, not the greatest, of course. And players like Closey was the sub, 19, not the greatest. Moraes just seems to have not really came on for Port Adelaide on the wings. I'll be interested to see how much longer he holds on to his spot. Kako and Stone, mid-40s, really not doing good for me at the moment, but I think they're starting to bottom out, so hopefully in the next couple of weeks I'll be able to sell them and then go for the upgrade. But my brother's team over the weekend had a pretty poor performance, I will say. Now, he did get a little bit unlucky for the fact that he went for the captaincy, Tom De Koning. He thought, like me, that he would have a really, really good week, but unfortunately really didn't respond. Only got 75, and as captain, 150 isn't good enough, really. I mean, you got to do a little bit better than that. He did go for a vice captaincy of Bailey Smith, who got 102. Probably should have just gone with that in the end, but unfortunately thought he'd go for a bit higher, and look, like we mostly expected, we thought he would do a little better than that. Now, his defense did pretty well. They averaged nicely. The lowest score was 86 to Matt Roberts, so, you know, you take that. In the midfield, James Peatling with the 76. I think he's got rid of him. We'll talk about the trades in a minute, but not too great. Nankervis, 84, really not that good. But other than that, he mostly had the same players as me scoring really well. But the players that he had different to me, you look like Jaden Short, Wanganeen Millerer, Jordan Clark, didn't get those really high scores as opposed to mine. Like you got Zach Merritt on my team. You've got a couple of other, you got Max Holmes as well. So really, those are the players that I had slightly different, did get a bit more. So you see his score there. He got 1,983 over the weekend. And his overall ranking from the top 150 has gone right up to 1,022. So not the greatest. He did kind of drop off over the weekend, but I don't think that's too bad. I'm sure he'll respond in the next couple of weeks because I am starting to go all the way up now. He's gone a bit up and down over the last couple of weeks. So having a really good week the week before, this week not so great. But let's get to our trades. So my trades for this week are Closey out for Caden Cleary for Sydney, and I've got rid of Sam De Koning, picking up Jack Bowie. So De Koning, I think that his price has bottomed out. I may change that trade if Reece Stanley does get dropped. But at the moment, it's going to be a bit hard because they've got the Monday game, which means that we won't see the full teams for Geelong and Hawthorn until Saturday, which probably means that I can't change my... Actually, I may be able to change my trades on the fact that Caden Cleary doesn't play until Sunday and Melbourne don't play until Saturday afternoon, I believe. So I may be able to hold off on that trade if the team's coming out early. However, I'm happy with Jake Bowie. His lowest score so far this year is 78. He's scored in 80s and 90s most weeks as well. As a guy who is increasing in price, Sam De Koning's bottomed out now. I think that's a good decision to go with that trade at the moment. Hold that money for the time being. And the reason why I got rid of Closey is he's bottomed out in price. I don't really think he's going to hold his spot much longer. But Caden Cleary, his job security is pretty good for Sydney. Played a little bit in the midfield last week in the gather round game, which was good to see. His price is just continually increasing. So I'm going to be going with Caden Cleary as a forward reserve at this stage. And in the next couple of weeks, I'm trying to look to get rid of either a Davidson or one of my midfield rookies and then upgrade over there. Because at the moment, I'm thinking that that's really where all I can do right now. My defensive rookies are absolutely starring. Bice, Reed, Trainer, and El Harley, all doing brilliantly. So I don't really have to worry about them defensive rookies at this stage. However, looking at the midfield rookies such as Murphy, Reed, Lawler was obviously injured, but not really the greatest. Xavier Lindsay as well. Those kind of rookies, and Moraes as well, are probably the players that I need to start looking to get rid of at this stage and try to upgrade. And Sam Davidson, I'm keeping him at the moment because his price is still increasing, so I'm pretty okay with that. But he is someone that I've got to start to look for in the next coming weeks, especially with the dual position changes coming with players like Nick Martin getting forward status, I think, and Christian Petrarca, Chad Warner. There are forwards that you can actually go for now. That's not maybe just Zach Rankin, which was really the only one you can go for, and maybe Jai Simpkin. But let's get to my brother's trades. He has gone Max Hall out for El Harley, and he's got rid of James Peatling for Will Ashcroft. So I really hope they don't give El Harley another subs role because I think he's really adding something to Essendon's ball movement. I think they can really use him. So I think that will be the last time they use him as a sub. And Max Hall, his price has kind of bottomed out now. Did brilliantly for him though, nearly at 500k from a rookie priced players, has done really well. And James Peatling did get his forward status, but my brother said, nah, get rid of him. And he thought, why not ruin my team and pick up Will Ashcroft and just ruin his form? But in all seriousness, he has actually brought up a decent point that the Brisbane, in the next couple of weeks, Brisbane have a pretty good run of games. They do have Collingwood this week, but Collingwood don't tend to tag, and I don't think they'll go to Will Ashcroft anyway, even if they were going to try and do a tagging role. So I think Will Ashcroft's in for a good couple of weeks. Knock on wood, hopefully I just didn't ruin his form. But James Peatling out for him. Interesting that he did get forward status, but the thing is as well, he may well have that forward status, but that's not really going to do much for him because he's not really doing much more than 70s at his best. He did have that one good week when Matt Crouch was out, but I don't think that's really a massive deal. And I think an upgrade like that, he's only 200k more, Will Ashcroft, and I think he's much more better output. So I think that's a good decision from him. But let's move to our AFL Fantasy ladder. Over the week, we've seen some big changes over here. First of all, I've jumped into 11th spot with a great performance from my team. 2,122, pretty good performance from my team overall. I see a couple of players in those top 11 positions who did really well over the weekend. You look at the Cheetah Cubs, 2,212, absolutely brilliant from him. Timber Ashworth, I don't know who you are if you're watching, mate, really good job from you. I think that's one of the highest scores over the week for everyone, so really good job from him. Have to bring up my man Lucas Martin at the moment. Pub Feed with Sauce. He was in the top, I think he was second in AFL Fantasy after round one. He's dropped off the pace, 1,974. He did worse than my brother, so that's not really good enough from him. The problem is, I think I will give Lucas a little bit of a reprieve here on the fact that I think he may have listened to us and may have listened to all the hype that we were giving him, and we've jinxed his team completely. So I am sorry, but he has dropped from first to third for the first time this year. My brother dropped all the way down from, I think he was third or fourth. He's dropped down to 8th spot with his poor performance, but I've jumped into the top 11. I'm pretty happy with that, and love the name, by the way. Top spot right now is Max Saligoat. I really like the name of him. He's jumped into top spot in our league at the moment with 9,828. Leads by only 5 points on Matt Hallows on 9,823. And then Pub Feed with Sauce dropping down with 9,803 at the moment. I am about 100 points off of top spot, so not too bad. It's a pretty big log jam in between about 1st and 11th we're looking at right now. So pretty close battle at the moment in the AFL Fantasy League right now. Seems like you guys are doing really well of it. I think we have about 80 people in the league right now, so obviously there's no more going to be joining, but that's really good to see that me and my brother are doing really well. We're keeping up with a lot of you guys, and at the moment Max Saligoat, with a great name by the way, leading the AFL Fantasy League at the moment. And finally, guys, let's get to the Flog of the Week. Now, there were a few candidates for the Flog of the Week this week. The umpiring on Sunday was pretty poor, I've got to say, Sunday night in the Hawthorn game, but that's not going to win it. There was a reporter who asked Bailey Smith if he was sorry about giving the finger to a Crows fan, and I thought that was a ridiculous question, and she deserves to lose her job. But, I mean, that's most journalists anyway, so she wasn't going to get it this week. I'm going to be giving the Flog of the Week nomination to Adelaide Oval over the weekend. Now, the experience of Adelaide Oval and Gather Round, fantastic. Loved it. The weather, picturesque. Love the warm weather. Probably a little bit too hot, but overall, didn't mind it. My issue is the pricing at the Adelaide Oval. The food, I didn't really have. I had the hot chips. They were $6.50. There was a big box of them. Really nice. Really good pricing. You upped the prices of drinks because you knew that it was going to be hot and you could get away with it. If I asked you how much a Coke Zero Sugar should cost you, if you say anything over $5 at a football venue, maybe even $6 I would sit with, I'd be like, okay, whatever. A little bit ridiculous, but it's at Adelaide Oval, whatever. It's convenient, I'll get it. $7.50 for a Coke Zero. Are you fucking kidding me? I almost threw the Coke at the lady's head. No, I didn't. Okay, but the machine that was working near it, I was more than happy to throw it at it if I could have. They weren't even paying staff. Half the kiosks or whatever at Adelaide Oval weren't even staffed by people. They were like machines that you put the bottle on. So you're not paying staff, so don't give me that shit, all right? You upped the price because you knew you would make us pay more because it was going to be 32 degrees, all right? Now, if it was only the Coke Zero that cost $7.50, I was miffed by it, trust me. I looked at my brother and he was shocked. But the next day, when was it? It was Saturday. I can't remember what it was. So on Friday night I bought the Coke Zero for $7.50. On the Saturday afternoon, when it was 32 degrees, Adelaide Oval, between Carlton and West Coast, so already my mood's not the greatest because I'm watching two crap teams play football. It was a great game, by the way. It was a great experience. But anyway, I wanted to buy. My brother went down and bought a water bottle. Now, a water bottle, like it was the normal size water bottle. I don't have one on me, but you know the normal size water bottle, right? I think it's like 300. No, it wouldn't be that. It'd be like 600 mils. I think it's 600 mils for a Mount Franklin water. Again, so remember, Coke Zero was $7.50. So you're expecting water would be around, cheaper than that, at around, I don't know, $5, maybe $6. Again, it's expensive. I get $5, $6, but not. It's like, okay, whatever. I'm sitting at the football. I'm enjoying my time. I'll pay for water, especially when it's hot. $8 for a bottle of water. Are you fucking kidding me? That was ridiculous. That people are sitting in the stands fucking frying their asses off, and you set the price at $8. Trust me, the older people around the ground probably would have been like shocked to hear that. And I'm not one to like, get angry at the workers. You don't get angry at the workers, all right? You get angry at Adelaide Oval because they fucking upped the price because they knew they could. 32 degrees, you upped the price of water to $8. A thing of chips costs $6.50. A bottle of water cost $8. You are fucking kidding. How is water more expensive than a box of chips? You are fucked. So that's why the Flog of the Week is going to Adelaide Oval for their pricing of drinks. That is fucking ridiculous. I heard someone as well. I didn't have any alcohol because I was driving, but someone was there and he said he paid $70 for 4 drinks. That sounds fucking wrong. Now, granted, I know alcohol can be a bit more expensive. I don't drink too much. Every now and then I will. And I know it is a bit expensive out there. But four drinks for $70? Are you kidding? That's what, over $15 a drink? Actually, you know what? Thinking about it now, it's not. I mean, it's bad, obviously, but it's not as bad as like $8 for a water bottle. I feel like that's worse, in my opinion. But anyway, let me know down below if you went to gather around over the weekend and you were as angry as me over $8 for fucking water. Are you fucking kidding me, Adelaide Oval? Anyway, it should stay here. I think gather around should stay here. Maybe down the price of water to $6 when the temperature is 32 degrees. You dogs. But anyway, that's all we have for this episode of the Boundary Riders podcast, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And if you are over on Spotify and listening over there, make sure to leave us 5 stars and make sure to follow so you're notified on the podcast and the review every single week. And the review will be back this week. I couldn't do it I couldn't do it last week, guys. I'm going to be honest, I was just enjoying my time watching the footy with my brother, and videos kind of escaped me. And when I got home at like 10:30 at night, sitting there with sunscreen all over me, I'm going to be honest with you, the last thing I wanted to do was sit on my computer and talk about the games that I just watched. So if you did miss the votes, they are on the community tab on the Boundary Riders YouTube channel if you want to find out what the votes were for all the games. But that's pretty much all I got from you guys. That's pretty much all I've got for this episode of the podcast, guys. Hopefully my brother's back next week and we'll have the segment for overreaction or fair enough when he does return. But that is all from me, guys. So I'll catch you all in the next one.